Hi guys, this is Omar for Awesome SVGs, and today I am bringing you a fun project and also my recipe to make these delicious macarons. Okay, so first I'll show you how to prepare your file and assemble the box. Okay, so first we are going to import our SVG file. So for that, click on Upload, Upload Image. Then click on Browse and navigate to the folder where your file is. I call this macaronbox2.svg. So double click on it and you will see something like this. This is the file for the body, the outer case, and the acetate piece. So click on Save. And your file is in Design Space now. Now click on the file and click on Insert Images. It might take a while to load, and your file is right here. You don't need to resize this. This will be cut from a 12 by 12 piece of paper. And what you need to do first is just click on the file or click on the name of the group right here and click on Ungroup. We're going to ungroup this. There are three parts for this: the outer case, the body, and the acetate piece. We are going to leave this as it is, and we're going to change the first layer of each element to a score line type. So for that, click on the first item. This is the outer case, and click on the first layer right here where it says Cut. And we're going to change the line type and make sure this is pink right here. And we're going to change the line type to Score. And as you can see, those lines are changed to scoring lines. Now we need to attach those scoring lines to the cutting lines around. For that, we're going to click on the name of that element right here. Or what you can do is just click and drag a rectangle around that item. And then you're going to click on Attach. That way your scoring lines are attached to your cut lines. Next, what we're going to do is change the scoring lines for the body and the centerpiece. And for that, we're going to do the same that we did before. We're going to click on the first layer right here. Make sure this is pink on the upper left corner. This is pink, and we're going to change the line type to Score. That way all those lines will be scored and not cut. Then we need to attach those scoring lines to the cut lines around, and for that we're going to click on the title or the top layer right here, or what you can do also is just click and drag a rectangle around all of it. Click and drag around, and then click on Attach. That way your scoring lines will be attached to your cut lines. Then click on Make It, and you'll see that on one mat you have the scoring lines and the cut lines for the outer case, and the scoring lines are the cut lines for the body and the divider right here. And then we have the acetate piece that we didn't do anything with it. Next, click on Continue and cut on your machine. Okay, so you won't need a heavy cardstock for this. I used Nina Creative Collection 65-pound cardstock for the black cardstock, and I use a Die Cuts with a View premium stack called Gold and White. It's beautifully foiled, and I think it's great for this project. Regarding the acetate, you don't need anything specific. A thin acetate or a thick acetate will work. Just make sure it's not so scratched so you can see the inside of the box. So first, take your sleeve or your outer case, and following the scoring lines, fold it, making mountain folds all over. Make sure you use a bone folder to make those creases very sharp. Next, you will add the inset piece. This piece just gives a nice little edge around those cutout boxes on the top of the sleeve. And I have a hard time aligning things, so this is my trick for achieving great alignment. I place my inset piece behind my sleeve and make sure everything is centered. And I also added a small piece of low tack tape. Once you are happy with the alignment, press that low tack tape and create a hinge with it. That way your inset piece will be perfectly centered on the sleeve. So add your double-sided tape or some liquid glue to adhere that inset piece. And then take your inset piece and fold it over the glue using that low tack tape as a hinge. Then carefully remove that low tack tape. And it's hard for me to purchase this tape, so I always save those little pieces for future projects. And there you have it, perfectly centered inset piece. Next, you can adhere the acetate. You can do this before the inset piece if you want to hide all the edges and the glue. I didn't realize the glue was going to show too much, but you can do this before adding the inset piece if you want to. You can use a bone folder to make sure the acetate sticks completely to that double-sided tape. And finally, close that sleeve or outer case using that gluing tab on the edge. It's very thin. You can use a double-sided tape or liquid glue for this. Just if you're using double-sided tape, make sure no tape sticks outside that tab, because it could prevent the body of the box from sliding. Now, a good way to make sure everything is aligned is just use those folds to close it shut. And there you have it. That's your sleeve ready to go. Now here are the two pieces for the body itself and the divider. The divider is very easy to do. Just create a mounting fold in the center and valley folds on the other two scoring lines. Now for the body itself, make sure you are facing the back of the cardstock. This is where the scoring lines were drawn on your machine. Turn the cardstock around and make valley folds on every single scoring line. Use your bone folder to make those creases very sharp. And you will fold everything, creating valley folds facing the back of the cardstock. This way, all your folds will be very neat. If you fold it the other way, the cardstock kind of cracks a little bit. So just make sure you are creating valley folds with the back of the cardstock facing you. Fold every horizontal scoring line and then fold every vertical scoring line. Now the assembly of the box is very easy to do. I like to use a little bit of liquid glue to hold everything together. This is Aleene's Tacky Glue Pen. Is a very fast drying glue. You could use the turbo version of the glue also if you want to. Remember to add just a small amount of glue so it doesn't oozes out of the gluing tab, and because otherwise your sides will get stuck to the bottom of the box, and you don't want that. Next, add little dots of glue to the sides and fold those tabs over. Repeat on the other side. Finally, glue the divider and the center to make sure it won't open up. And add a couple of dots of glue to the bottom of that divider so it's fixed inside the body of the box. And the only thing you need to do now is just make sure that divider is centered inside the box and put your macarons in. You can also put any sweets or candy bars or, I don't know, Reese's cups inside to give them as gifts. And now back to macarons. Okay, so French macarons are delicate cookies. They have a crunchy exterior and a very chewy interior. They tend to be expensive because of the ingredients that you use to make them and also the difficulty involved in making them. They require patience, accuracy, and practice, but they are not impossible to make. And once you learn how, you'll be hooked. And even if your shells don't come out the way you want them to, and they look something totally different, they will still be delicious. So don't worry about it. The base ingredients are almond flour, egg whites, confectioner's sugar, and granulated sugar. A kitchen scale is a must when making macarons. I encourage you to measure your ingredients accurately instead of using cups or spoons references. So let's get started. First, separate the eggs in advance. 2 eggs will make enough dough for 12 to 14 1.5-inch diameter macarons. You want to age the egg whites, so do this the day before you make your macarons. Place them in a clean container and cover them with plastic wrap. Keep them in the fridge if the weather is too hot, or leave them out overnight so they dehydrate a little. Some recipes call for a very specific amount of egg whites, but I've found it is very difficult to add or remove just a few grams. So I have created a table to measure the rest of the ingredients based on your egg whites. So weigh the egg whites and remember this number, as this will be the reference measurement for the rest of the ingredients. Measure the exact amount of granulated sugar and save for the meringue. You will need a very fine almond flour, so the surface of your cookies is smooth and shiny. Most brands claim to be super fine, but I've realized skipping this step renders rough-looking macarons, so measure the almond flour and the icing sugar according to the table. Then again, be exact. Measurements are given in grams, but most kitchen scales have metric and imperial systems incorporated, so there shouldn't be a problem. If it is, please let me know and I'll find a way to convert the measurement table. Once you have measured your almond flour and your sugar, process them in a food processor for a couple of seconds. Stir in between if necessary so all the powder is refined. Give it a couple more pulses. And then sift in a bowl. I use a very handy sifter with a double filter mesh and 2 steel blades, with just the right size for your almond flour to pass through. Almond flour, it's a little bit coarser than regular flour, so you'll need this larger whole mesh. I'll be sure to put a link to this product in the video description below. Discard all the larger bits, or you can eat them. They are really delicious. Now prepare a piping bag using a large round tip. I use a 2A Wilton tip to pipe the macaron shells. Make sure you twist the bottom end of the bag once you have put the metal tip in. This is to keep the dough from flowing out. You can also use a bag clip for this if it's easier for you. And now comes the hard part, making the French meringue. On a stand mixer, put your aged egg whites and using the whisk attachment, start making your meringue. Start at a medium-low speed. I have added a real-time stopwatch on the lower left corner of the screen for you to keep track of the time. Now remember that this should be taken only as a reference because the real time varies depending on the temperature and humidity where you're working. Add the cream of tartar. I use a little less than half a teaspoon for every 4 egg whites, so measure accordingly to the number of egg whites that you've used. The chapters for the making of the macarons are on the video description below, so if you want to skip the French meringue making, you can just go ahead and go to the next chapter. After a minute and a half, or when your eggs start foaming, change the speed to a medium-high. Let your egg whites become opaque white and start adding the sugar. Add a third of the sugar at a time, 15 to 20 seconds apart or so, allowing for the sugar to dissolve and the egg whites. Add the second third of the sugar and keep whisking. And add the final third of the sugar. Don't overmix your egg whites. It is better to check more often than to overmix the meringue. As you can see here, the meringue has reached a soft peak stage and it needs to be whipped to stiff peaks. So keep beating in 20-30 second increments and check again. The meringue is ready when it becomes glossy and it kind of clumps inside the whisk attachment. Once your meringue is ready, add your vanilla extract and your food coloring if you will be making all shells of the same color. And we are going to stabilize the meringue by whisking it at a very low speed for about 1 minute. If you want different color shells, Add the gel food coloring when mixing the dry ingredients with the meringue. Here you can see the meringue clumping inside the whisk attachment. When making different colored shells, divide the meringue and add the food coloring separately. It is a good idea to weigh your mixing bowl and having that result handy. That way you will always know the weight of the content without having to take it all to a different container to measure it. Make sure you use a clean glass or metal bowl. Like I said, we will add the food coloring if you didn't add it in the previous step, and also we will add the dry ingredients. Remember to use a gel food coloring to avoid adding too much moisture to the mix. The process is repeated later in the video with different colored shells and from a different angle. Add half of the dry ingredients first and mix by folding the dough from the edges to the center. Once the first half is mixed in, correct the color if necessary, and add the second half of the flour sugar mixture. Incorporate until you can't see any leftover powder. The dough at this stage should be and should feel a little bit dry. To make the dough thinner, you'll need to take some air out of it. This is called Macronage, and it involves pressing the dough lightly against the sides of the bowl and then gathering it in the center. Be delicate and mix continuously until you achieve the desired texture. Here you can see the batter is not quite ready yet. It's not flowing in a continuous motion, so just keep doing your macronage. Many recipes call for a molten lava texture, but personally I've never seen it up close and I hope I never will. So a good way to tell when it is done is to drop a small amount of dough in the center of your batter and wait for about 20 seconds for the edges to blend slightly. It won't disappear, they will just blend. Another way to tell when your batter is ready is when it's glossy and it flows from the spatula in a continuous ribbon. Here is a small amount in the center of the batter, and if you count to 20, it should kind of blend in with the rest of the batter. So now that your dough is ready, we are going to put it inside the prepared piping bag, and try to do this always in a continuous flow to avoid incorporating air bubbles inside the bag. Just close the opening of the bag, and here's when the twisting of the bag comes in handy. It allows for the dough to stay inside the bag without flowing out. And once you press the back of the bag, it will flow to the tip. Pipe your shells in one single motion, swirling at the end to cut the flow. I have tried Silpat's parchment paper, but definitely the best results I have achieved are on Macaron dedicated silicone mats with predefined shapes that you see here. With these mats, all the shells turn out the same size, and they also kind of prevent the overflow when you pipe too much dough. Always make sure you hold your bag vertically and you pipe from about ½ inch from the mat in a continuous flow, just until the dough flows outside the inner circle. You don't want to fill until it reaches the outer circle, or your macarons will spread out and you will end up with joint shells that are hard to pull apart. Remember, later in the video there's a different angle for the piping. Now gently tap the bottom of the baking sheet with your hand to release air bubbles. You can also do this by tapping them on your counter. Just make sure you hold the silicone mat. Next, using a toothpick, pop any air bubbles that have risen to the surface, cleaning the tip every time to make sure they burst completely. Let the shells rest for 30 minutes to 1 hour until they develop a skin and are dry to the touch. The center of the shells should be soft but not sticky, while the edges should be a little bit drier. And here's my second batch. I colored these using the Wilton Color Right system, a great way to achieve perfect color every time. For these, I wanted a sand color, so I added the indicated drops, and voila, sand colored shells without the need to color correct. Like before, add half of your dry ingredients and mix in. Please notice that the timer is sped up here. Add the second half of the dry ingredients and incorporate. Finish by doing the Macronage step. And now it's ready. This is what we call ribbon consistency. Twist the bottom of your piping bag and push it inside the piping tip. and then place the batter inside the bag. Make sure your mat is perfectly clean and pipe the shells. Then tap the bottom to remove air bubbles. And also use a toothpick to pop some of those bubbles that have risen to the surface. Finally, let them dry until they develop a skin on the surface. Preheat your oven and please try to be specific at 137 degrees Celsius or 279 degrees Fahrenheit and bake for 18 minutes. This is the temperature I've gotten the best results at and allows you to achieve a hollowless shell, crispy on the outside and mellow and chewy on the inside that just melts in your mouth. Let the shells cool completely before removing them from the mat. Now you can prepare any filling that you want. Buttercream and ganache are the most common, and you can get very creative with curds and jams. Here's a quick coffee ganache. The recipe in the video description below makes enough to fill 12 to 14 macarons. Measure 110 grams of good quality chocolate. Here I'm using Calabat W2 white chocolate, which has the right sweetness and texture for ganaches. And it also comes in small buttons. That saves you the need for chopping the chocolate. Next, put 44 grams of heavy or whipping cream in a pan. Do not use half and half, whole milk, or other liquids because the ganache won't sit up correctly. Heat on the stove top until just simmering. If it's boiling, the cream is too hot and could separate or even burn the chocolate, so heat it at a medium temperature. Add a teaspoon of vanilla extract and a whole packet of Starbucks Be Ready Brew iced coffee or 2 teaspoons of instant coffee. Stir constantly until you see little simmers around the edges. Now take the cream out of the heat and pour immediately over the chocolate. Let it sit for a couple of seconds and stir until all the buttons are melted. Finally, and while the mix is still warm, add 8 grams of unsalted butter and mix thoroughly. Let the ganache cool completely before filling the macarons. I like to prepare my fillings before my shells, and I like to let it sit covered with plastic wrap until my cookies are baked and completely cooled down. Just give it a good stir to kind of fluff it up a little before using it. Fill a piping bag with a large tip, and if you like your macarons tall and with a lot of filling, pipe the ganache around and a little bit in the center. If not, just add a fair amount in the center only. Finally, place another cookie on top and let them set in the fridge for 24 hours. It's a good idea to fill them at least 24 hours before serving to allow for the filling to soften the inside of the cookie. Take your macarons out at least an hour before serving to allow the cookie to turn soft and the filling to become creamy. Be aware that in hot weather, you don't need as much time. And there you have it. Beautiful, delicate treats. And that's it for today's video. I really hope you liked this project and you give macarons a try. It's a great project if you are staying at home. If you like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, and don't forget also to subscribe to my channel and hit that bell button next to the subscribe button to be notified every time a new video is uploaded. I hope you are safe and please stay home. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again very soon. Bye-bye.